Welcome to Every Child Belongs. I'm Kim Botto, an adoptive mom, grandma, and advocate for kids and teens with disabilities, as well as a longtime leader of kids and student ministries. In this show, we explore how we can create spaces where every child feels heard and valued, whether neurodivergent, differently abled, or they've experienced trauma. Every child belongs. We'll hear from educators, parents, professionals, and more, finding practical ideas that help build a compassionate and supportive world for every child. Let's get started. I want more people in the world to know about Abby Howard, so I'm so happy to have you on the podcast today, Abby. Abby, she has the Accessible Gospel. That's how I met her, through her Instagram page, which if you are a parent of a kid with disabilities or you are a church that wants to be more accessible, go there. She has all kinds of practical tips. But God used your own journey, Abby, with disability for you to advocate on behalf of this people group. And the work you do is making sure that all families have access to church and the gospel. And you sustained a rare spinal cord stroke. And it was during that time that you really became passionate and burdened for people that you now find yourself a part of, the disability people group. You got some credentials. You don't just have experience, you've got credentials. You graduated last year with a degree in special ed and a minor in autism, which so many kids with autism now in the church. And you work as a full-time disability minister coordinator at your local church, and you create all kinds of resources through the Accessible Gospel. So, Abby, what did I leave out? What do you want people to know about you?
Yeah, I think the most important thing about me is just that I love the Lord and I want to go wherever He sends me and want to be obedient to Him. So right now, that's where that's how I've come here and get to talk to you. So I just feel really blessed and excited to be on this adventure.
Your resources on Instagram are so helpful. They're accessible, they're easy to understand, they're short. I mean, I've shared them with so many people. So, thank you for creating that. And one of the things you do is just about every week, you share wins in your own ministry and you ask others to share their wins. So I want to start out by just saying, what are you seeing happening? What are the wins happening in churches as far as making the gospel accessible to everyone?
Oh, yes. That's one of my favorite things is every Sunday after I finish church, I get on there and I say like, "Hey, what was the highlight of your ministry? What was the highlight of the day?" And I just get like hundreds of responses of people saying, "Hey, I talked to my pastor this week and we're getting the ball rolling." Or, "Hey, we launched our disability ministry this week and we had this many kids show up." And I have family testimonies of we were able to go to church for the first time and we didn't have to get called out of service, and but also our child learned the gospel. And then there's also small wins, which are really actually big wins in our ministry, but they'll say, one of our students transitioned to worship for the first time. Like we used a visual schedule and it worked. And so just seeing those just makes me so happy because I mean it can be hard, some of the things that we deal with. So, like, getting to see those wins is so encouraging, and I think it also I just share people's responses, and it encourages others of like, "Hey, this person just launched their ministry. Everyone stop what you're doing right now, and let's pray for them." But it also encourages
Mhm.
other people to maybe go have that conversation with their pastor. So, I've been seeing that a lot lately, and I just feel so blessed. Like, I truly believe there's a revival happening, and it's so cool that
I
we get
agree.
a front row seat to it. Yeah.
Yes, I agree. And the work you're doing gives people baby steps to start the journey.
Yeah.
Sometimes it can feel so overwhelming, but the ideas that you share are easy to implement. Okay, so we talked about some wins. Oh wait, I'll share a win. Can I share one with you?
Yeah.
So my grandson, as you know, he's 8, he's autistic, and as his little sister says, he uses very few words out of his mouth
Mm.
to talk. He does communicate, it's just not through his mouth. However, we were walking the other day and he kept saying, "God rescued Noah," over and over. "God rescued Noah. God rescued Noah." And then he said, "God tells us what to do on planet Earth." And I think that was around Artemis, or no, was it, what's Artemis?
Yeah, that was like the NASA.
That was in it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think people were talking about planet Earth. But when I told his mom, they had talked about Noah at church that
Come
week.
on.
And so he was telling us what he had learned that Sunday, and I just wanna give a shout out to that church, but also the fact that the church told his family, so when these kids do start
Mhm.
repeating things, they can know, "Oh, I know where they got it," and maybe
Yeah.
even find out more information, but yeah, that was I was this just happened, and I was super pumped about
Oh,
it.
that makes me so happy.
Yeah, it was awesome. But so I love how we talked about wins, but also there are things that people get wrong
Mm.
about people with disabilities. What are some of those things that maybe you're kind of feisty sometimes? You get a little frustrated. What are some of the things that people get wrong with you that frustrate you?
Yeah, I think the biggest one is the comment of, "Do they even understand what we're talking about? Can they even understand the gospel?" So, yeah, I mean, I can get a little feisty because I do think it is our calling to advocate. Proverbs 31, 8 through 9 talks about speaking up for those who can't speak for themselves, and so just hearing people say that, knowing that they really even haven't spent very much time with these kids or these students, and I just like, my rebuttal to that is the same God who, split seas and raised people to life is not hindered by a disability. Like, why do we think that He would create someone and they have the inability to know Him? That is not our God. That our God is
No,
all
it's not.
powerful, and we're gonna say it stops when a kid can't speak with words out of his mouth. So yeah, the that would be probably the number one is that they don't presume competence and they don't think that
Mhm.
our students are understanding what we're teaching them. And then the other thing I would say they get wrong, like on the church level, is we just don't have anyone here for a disability ministry, which then my rebuttal is like, just Google the statistics of how many people have a
Right.
disability. The disability people group is the only people group that you can become a part of at any time. And that was true for me. I became a part of it at 19 years old. Yeah, so I like you can Google how many people have it. 80 to 90% of families impacted by special needs and disability don't go to church. So it's an unreached people group. There's so many kids on IEPs and 504 plans in the school system. So if they're not represented in your church, it's on you. They are
That's right.
around, they are in your community, and you just don't want to see it. And therefore, you're never going to fulfill your church's vision statement because you're leaving out an entire people group who want to be reached with the gospel, and we as the church, the what should be the most accessible place, are stopping them from coming.
Right.
So they're getting it wrong because it's like a willful ignorance that they don't want to see the need. I mean, we can keep going with statistics. 1 in 36 or 1 in 37 are being diagnosed with autism.
Right.
So, yeah, those would be the 2 big things that I see churches getting wrong, but I also have to come back and be like, "Okay, need to take a deep breath. I need to, like, emotionally regulate here because before I became disabled, I didn't realize there was a huge need." And so what I want people to see, I want the scales to, like, fall off people's eyes and for them to see it without them before they have to walk a road of disability.
Right, right. So, okay, so you have brought up your own disability, and how
Yeah.
is that tied into you say that God has given you a burden for this people group, people with disabilities. How did that come about? Did it have anything to do with your own personal experience, or did it happen before that?
Yeah, so yes to both. Now that I can look back on it, I'm like, "Wow, God, you were prepared you had prepared this in advance and you were preparing me for this." But I became disabled at 19 after sustaining a rare spinal cord stroke, which caused a spinal cord injury and paralyzed me from the chest down. So I went from just signing to play college soccer to becoming disabled overnight and, being a wheelchair user. So that is like a very small glimpse of my story, but in that, one of the things that I was able to do while I was in the rehab hospital was you get, like, an off-campus pass when you're stable enough to leave the hospital, but you're not good enough to not need the hospital full
Mhm,
time, so you
mhm.
can go off a little bit, and when we got that off-campus pass, the first thing my family and I did, we were like, "We're going to church," and so we were in a new state, and I had emailed the church because now a wheelchair user, or I was at that point. I was like, "Hey, I just wanna make sure you have an elevator." It's a really old building, so there's a ton of stairs, and they're like, "Yes, we'd love to have you." And I got there, and the elevator broke that morning, like, it was
Oh.
broken. And there's no way to get up to the sanctuary without, like, it was a massive flight of stairs, and so, I mean, my family and I were just kinda sitting there, and, we're trying to figure this out, but, they were like, "Just wait, like, we have an idea." And there were 4 or 5 guys that come running out of the church, and they're like, "We do CrossFit," and I'm like,
Oh.
"Okay, I'm not sure how that's gonna help me here." But they were like, "No, we wanna get you into church." And so, wheelchair and all, next thing I know, they are carrying me up these stairs. So we get up the first flight, which is just to, like, the foyer, and I'm like, "Hey, like, I'm good here. I can hear everything." They're like, "No, no, no, we want you with the body of Christ worshiping." And so, next thing I know, I'm getting picked up in the wheelchair again and up the flight of stairs. But I say all that story because it's pretty funny, but the Lord has used that to open my eyes to the massive need that a lot of churches are inaccessible. And not only can the church be inaccessible, but the way that we teach the gospel is
Mhm.
inaccessible. And so that, my disability and that story specifically is like a defining point of opening my eyes and having that burden. So then from there, like, launched me into researching about this people group and finding out the statistics of it being an unreached people group, which goes back to, like, before I was disabled. The Lord just gave me a huge passion and burden for unreached people groups. So throughout high school, it's like, I think I'm going to be like a missionary. I'm going to live overseas amongst unreached, unengaged people groups. And then when I became after my stroke, I was so frustrated. I was like, God,
Mhm.
like, I'm never going to be able to do that. I have all these medical supplies and everything, and yet that I can look back to that and be like, "Wait, no, you were preparing me for this mission field that you have me in right now." So, sorry, that was kinda like a really broad, overview, but
No, I
yeah.
love hearing that, and the way the church just jumped in, they didn't just say, "Sorry, elevators broke." I mean, to
Right.
rally those guys and for them to be so excited to get
Yeah.
and not be satisfied with just getting you in the foyer, like, they wanted you with the body of Christ, that's amazing, and then you
Mhm.
talked about the buildings not being accessible, but then also talk to us more about what it looks like when the gospel is not accessible.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, something you hear a lot is that a wheelchair ramp gets them in, and then that's the end of it. But, like, what does belonging look like for these families? And then just so my background's in education, and there's always, like, new evidence-based research coming out, and it's just very evident that the way students learn now is different than how they learned even 5 years ago, 10, 25.
Right.
And so I think gone are the days of making students sit around a table and comply and like, make sure they can find the book in the Bible and read it. Okay, well, a kid might not want to sit at a table. They might not be able to read the words on the pages. It might be too loud. There's just so many things that therefore the gospel becomes inaccessible to them. So we're not
Mhm.
changing the gospel, we're just changing the way that we are teaching it to these students. I say kids a lot because
Right.
that's who I got hired to work with, but I mean everyone when I'm saying this.
Right.
And so if it's sometimes it's just a really small change of maybe we have flexible seating, maybe we have symbol supported stories, maybe we do errorless learning activities, and therefore that gives them access to the gospel. So the gospel in and of itself is not inaccessible, but the way that we are teaching it.
Yes, yes. And I think that's a very important distinction. It's because a lot of people do think it's wider bathroom stalls and a wheelchair ramp, and it's so
Yes,
much
yeah.
more than that. But I read somewhere where you said, "I advocate at my job for those impacted by disabilities, but then get embarrassed by my own.
Yeah.
I'm working on being more honest." So just so everybody knows, we talked about this ahead of time because I wanted to make sure because this is a new
Yes.
journey for you, and you said yes will share. So tell me, what's it been like to start letting people see more of your own experiences?
Yeah. I was so scared to start posting about it because the nature of a spinal cord injury can be very embarrassing. A lot of people think that paralysis just affects the ability to walk, and that's not true. Everything from my injury level, which is for me mid chest down, is affected by paralysis. And so having that a part of my story has been so isolating. And so for 6 years, I feel like I have just suffered in silence and in darkness a bit, and it got to the point where I felt like I was living one life of advocating for my families and telling people, like, just how incredible these kids are, and they're made in the image of God, and God has a good plan for them. His promises
Mhm.
are true for them too. And then for me over here, I was, like, hiding mine. And so it got to the point where I felt like the Lord was convicting me to just be more open and honest about it. And something that I've realized as I've started posting it, I mean, there are so many blessings that have come out of it and the people I've connected with. But one of the things is that the burden feels lighter. And
Mm,
it's because I've let people in to help me bear the burden, which has ultimately helped like my mental and emotional health. But yeah, I got to the point where the Lord showed me, he's like, you are hindering people from bearing this burden with you, and that's what the body of Christ is for. And while it is embarrassing, like I probably wouldn't sit down in my life group and like talk about it. For some reason it felt a lot easier to like blast a video on social media that ended up like getting over 100,000 views. And I was like, well, now everyone knows these things that like I wouldn't even tell my I wouldn't even tell my closest friends about it. But yeah, it's been. And then another thing that people have been commenting have been like, wow, like we have so much respect that knowing what you go through on a daily basis and then like still showing up to serve the families in your ministry. And I'm like, and it's because of this story that the Lord has entrusted me with that I get to serve these families.
mhm.
And yeah, all people from all over the world are telling me that they're praying for me. And yeah, seeing the body of Christ in action has been just a huge blessing that has really helped because yeah, so I just had surgery, I 2 months ago today. So that's what has brought about, like, new medical supplies and just new routines in my life changing, and I just feel so much lighter now that it's, like, out in the open.
Mhm. So, you said you were sharing stuff on social media that you hadn't even shared with some people who are closest to you. So now is this helping so they know now if they follow you on
Yes.
social media. How has it been then sharing in, your personal relationships, the people that you're face to face with?
Well, now I feel like I don't have to hide anything, and I don't have to, um, cancel. That's what I was having to do every time because I was so embarrassed about it, like, "Oh, I can't do this." So I was missing out on, like, a lot of social events, and so far, like, all of my friends have been like, "Thank you for letting us know how we can specifically pray for you." And now it's like, yeah, I might walk a little bit slower, I might, like, slow them down, and they would never say that, but it's just allowed me to deepen those relationships, with my friends, and it has been nothing but a positive experience finally getting to share it, with, yeah, even people who I've known for a long time, and they would ask me about it, and I would just beat around the bush, but they were always so genuine about it. It was
Mhm.
just me, like, getting over being embarrassed when I sit there and advocate every day for my families to not be embarrassed. They're like, "We feel bad, like, asking for this accommodation." I'm like, why are you feeling bad right now? Like, this is you're not asking for anything crazy. You wanna be accepted, you want to belong, you wanna feel loved and accepted and safe. Like, nothing about that is crazy. That's what everyone desires." And then I wasn't living it out in my own story.
So what can we learn from that? Because you're not the only one that feels that way. What can we learn from that as we support others?
I mean, everyone is walking around with something that you don't know about. And if you would just take a minute and when you actually say, "How are you doing?" to actually be ready to hear that response is huge because I
Mhm.
I was getting to the point where people are asking me that all the time and I was like, I feel like all I am doing is sharing bad news and complaining.
Mm.
But when the people actually lean in and they're like, "No, we want to hear that," has just made all of the difference. And so we can learn, like, let's just slow down. Let's just actually meet people where they're at and be the hands and feet of Christ. You know, I think of sorry, this gets me going on a tangent, but
Mhm.
I think of the story of the parable of the Good Samaritan, and it's like, are we gonna be the priest and, the Levite who are, like, shimmying by and trying to avoid the person who had been beaten and left for dead on the side of the road? Or are we gonna come in and be like, "Hey, I'm gonna help you." And that's, like, that's what we get to choose to do, and at the end of the day, that's what Jesus did for us. He came when we were beaten, bruised, and left for dead, and he came and cared for us and ultimately came to die in our place and be our advocate. But it's like that Jesus did that for me. Why am I not doing that for others? Why can't we as like the capital C church be the one to stoop down and say, "Hey, I'm going to bear this burden with you. I'm going to
Mhm.
bind up your wounds, and I want to usher you into the presence of God."
So as you look at I mean, you're still learning how to do this, share your
Mhm.
story,
Yeah.
and there are hard parts the families that you work with, they have hard parts of their story. So what part of your story are you still learning how to tell?
I think I'm still learning how to share that I'm still not okay. I'm still walking this road, and just because I can walk doesn't mean I'm fully healed. So like holding that in one hand of I am living with a disability every day and then holding the hope in the other hand that I'm also just living in the awkward in between. That's kind of what I've like coined the term of my body's not fully healed and it won't be until I go to glory. And so trying to navigate how to share the things are not okay, but I get to count it all joy, and this
Mhm.
is really hard right now, but I know this is not the end of the story, and that's what a lot of our families are walking through. They're gonna continue to get hard diagnoses, they're gonna continue to have hard IEP meetings, they're gonna continue to, like, just it's always that's what I was talking about this with one of the moms in our ministry. It's just a constant grief. There's always the missed milestones. There's always like in my own story, my college experience didn't look like my friends. These, the college experience for our students won't look like their neurotypical peers. And
Mhm.
so there's always something that it's so hard because it's like, man, the joy of the Lord is my strength, and I'm also grieving right now. And that's been hard to try to succinctly and like efficiently communicate.
Mhm. Well, and really what you the disability you have is what we refer to as an invisible disability, which at
Yeah.
first glance you look, and I'm putting in air quotes, fine.
Mhm.
However, there are all kinds of things going on, and I know those are some of the kids that you're most passionate about, are the kids with invisible disabilities. What do we misunderstand about them, and how might we better support them and their families?
Yeah. Man, something I tell serve team whether they sorry, we call our volunteers serve team. So something I tell like volunteers and serve team is like, you you do not live in that body. And so I know it's frustrating. Like I know maybe the way that they are communicating their behavior right now is frustrating. They're not wanting to do it like that. And so because of that and because it's invisible, people might have these assumptions of, man, that like parenting at home must be really
Right,
bad or
right,
I mean, fill in the blank with anything,
right.
like, he must have had a lot of sugar before he came, and I'm like, "You're misunderstanding it because we don't wanna take a second to step back and be like, we don't know what these students went through the night before, they might not have slept, we don't know how their week was, we don't know what their home life is." And so I just stop and say, like, "This you're not living in that body. They're not wanting to do that, and you could not imagine what they're going through. They are trying so hard they're trying hard to be like their neurotypical peers, which is so sad to see.
It is.
Yeah, because kids well, they get made fun of, and so there's a lot of advocacy on that side of things of just trying to help people understand, like, this is how they operate, but also, can we get to know them? Like, they are really cool, and find common ground and lean in, and yeah, it's just such an honor to get to do that and advocate, but it's also really sad to, like, watch these families. They're like, "We were in therapy all week. We go straight from school to OT to PT to SLP and or speech," and all just so that they can try to get their kids to fit a mold that they were never meant to fit, and so I just like coming alongside families. My favorite thing to say and the thing that always sparks the best conversation is, "How can we best support you?" Because I can
Yes.
sit here and I can try to guess,
Yes.
but you know your student the best, and I'll even ask it to the student. I'm like, "How can I best support you right now?" And and it's they're never asking for anything crazy, like, we already talked about that, but that's the best thing that I can do, and then I just get to listen and get to say, "Alright, this is our next step."
If you're loving today's conversation and want to dive even deeper into creating spaces where every child belongs, check out my book, Boundless Hope. It's packed with practical tools, real stories, and powerful insights to help you make a difference. Get yours today. Just head to kimbotto.com or Amazon to order now. Abby, when we talk about invisible disabilities, I think a lot of people aren't even aware of what those are because they're
Mhm.
invisible. I know ADHD is one, and I think kids are being diagnosed, about 11% of kids are diagnosed with ADHD. But tell us more about what are invisible disabilities? How common are they?
Yeah, so living with an invisible disability has just made me realize that everyone is walking a different road that we might not know about. And so the statistic right now is that 70 to 90% of disabilities are invisible. So while you see people coming in with wheelchairs or with maybe they're coming in with AFO braces or a walker, there's more people coming in with something that you cannot see. And that I mean, that's true for me. I also have a heart condition that is completely invisible and yet is one of the toughest things that I walk through. And so, yeah, I think it just goes back to when you're asking people how they are and actually leaning in and being ready to say, "Hey, we're going to go to war together on this. We're going to fight in prayer together on this." And then we're not gonna assume that maybe a behavior that we see is just the bad parenting that we talked about, but we're gonna assume that there's something going on that we don't know about, and should someone let us in on that, what an honor to get to walk that road and figure it out and get to be creative of how we get to, welcome people into church and show them Jesus, because if we're not doing that, we are completely missing the point.
Yeah, we are.
But we also realize that we live in a broken world, and people are carrying things that are so heavy that feel like that is going to break them. I mean, I've been in that story. That's been a part of my story since the beginning. It's like I don't think I can do another day of this. And yet when we get to walk that road with someone, we get to come in and say, "Hey, let me carry that weight for a second." And then it just kind of lets you like take a deep breath and breathe and be like, "I can do this, but it's not because it's in my own strength."
Right. So
Mm.
basically, you're saying, like, assume people are doing the best they can. And if they're
Yeah.
not, there's something behind it. I always like to say the story started long before our interaction with them. So they're bringing
Yes.
other stuff into it. And so look for ways to support and be a friend. How are
Yeah.
you in opening up and sharing how people can support you? Is that becoming
Yeah.
easier?
No, I'm still working
No.
on that. I'm definitely working on that one because I just wanna be independent, and that's really hard when I'm 25, and I'm still living with my parents who are incredible, but that's hard because 'cause I'm like, "I just wanna be independent. I wanna be like all of my friends." Like, I wanna be able to like, I already touched on, like, how hard my college journey was, and yeah, like, I don't wanna always live in my parents' house, and so then I just, like, kinda get hard-headed, which I think in a lot of ways the Lord has used my hard-headedness in good ways as, like, I advocate for this ministry, but I do get hard-headed in the sense it's like, "No, I don't need help," when I do. Like, I can't in the chronic illness community, there's, like, different terms you use, but basically we only have so many things we can do in a day, and so what might be easy for someone to go fill up their car with gas, or it might be easy for them to make their bed, brush their teeth. All of that is, like, taking out of my tank, and so, truly, any day that I'm like, "Hey, I got out of bed today, that's a miracle," and, like, "I brushed my teeth today, that's a miracle," because those things are hard. And so when all of those are, like, withdrawing from, like, my energy tank, when I'm finally, like, out in the world and, like, I finally make it to work, I'm like, "Well, now I'm exhausted." Like, I am spent for the day and I haven't even started my day, but then I don't wanna ask for support from, like, coworkers or from my friends because 'cause I'm like, "No, I can do this," and then I just end up making myself sick.
So are you
Mhm.
continuing to work on that and accepting help?
Yes, I am. Like, even as we prepare to go to DC this week,
Yeah.
my family's like, "Let us help you making your meals, let us help you." My dad went and filled up my gas in my car, but it's so hard for me to just, like, let them do that because I feel like I need to be the only one that can do it. Like, I'm in quotations because I know that, like, I'm not doing it in my own strength, but, like, I'm the one running this ministry, I'm the one doing that, and I feel like I just have to have it all together. When really, like, my favorite quote that I read before I leave my room every morning is, "God, I am far too weak for this, and that's okay because that's exactly where the mission of God starts." Yeah.
Yes, yes. So as we, you work in a church, in a disability ministry, working with kids, and we want kids to belong. And you have given some stories about people where people don't feel like they belong. So what do you think churches unintentionally communicate? You don't belong, even when they think they're welcoming. Because the stats have shown us, the Lifeway study was 99% of pastors said, yes, our church is welcoming for somebody with disabilities, where the disability community is saying, according to Eric Carter, who I believe, that 48% of them have left a
Yep.
church. So where is the church missing it? Thinking that they're doing great, but not.
Yeah. Yeah, so 2 things in mind, 2 things come to mind. 1, I don't think they understand the scope of disability, and then 2, I think they think that they're doing a good thing by saying, "We're not equipped," which I think is, like, the most hurtful thing to say. Like, "What do you mean you're not equipped to love my child? What do you mean you're not equipped to make sure this is a safe space for my child?" That's not We wanna make sure everyone's loved and everyone's safe, and because they don't want to do the work, because they don't want things to look a little bit messy, they rather just say, "We're not equipped," when it's like, there are resources out there, there are so many people in this community that have spent I mean, you wrote a whole book. It's like, what they just don't wanna take the extra time, and I know that can be harsh to hear, but at the end of the day, I'm tired of reading 100 DMs of saying we got
Yes.
kicked out of our church, we
Yep.
were asked to leave,
Yep.
and so it's like, "Church, actually, we need to wake up because it's not that hard, we just make it hard. It's not that expensive, we just think it
Preach.
is, and
Right.
you think we have to have a full-blown ministry." No, it's like just 1 child. If 1 child comes in and they have extra support needs, that is our responsibility. It's also our joy, but it is our responsibility to do it. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. It is free to make sure that, maybe a child needs one-to-one buddy. We call it the buddy system. Well, that's free to do. Maybe a child just needs help transitioning. That's not that hard to do either. It's okay if ministry looks a little messy. Like, I think we're too comfortable in this is a broad overview, and I understand this, but, like, in American Christianity and American churches, like, we're just too comfortable. We want everything to look, like, polished and perfect when, like, I mean, Jesus's earthly ministry was perfect, and yet it looked messy, so much
Sure
so that the
did.
Pharisees were like, "What are you doing, eating
Sure
with
did.
tax collectors and sinners?" And he's like, "That's what I came for." And so we're literally sending families and people away who are the exact people that Jesus came for and died for. So, yeah, they think they're being loving by saying they're not equipped, and then going back to, like, they don't understand the full scope. So, if 99% of pastors are saying, like, yeah, they feel welcome, and be like, "Okay, well, what if someone who's deaf comes in? Can they even hear what you're saying?" Then no, like, they're not gonna feel welcome because they can't even hear you. Someone who's blind, like, the disability is so that's very broad, and so I mean, honestly, I can't even believe that 99% of pastors would say that, because half the time, some of these families can't even come into the church because of the stairs.
Right, right.
So, that honestly, that's kinda shocking to me that it was that
I
high.
wanna go back to you said church is saying and I need to qualify because 'cause I'm working on not saying church because it's not the big C church, it is individuals within the church. So,
Yeah.
there are leaders that will say, "I'm not equipped." You and I hear that
Mhm.
all the time, all the time, all the time. I love to give people scripts to say, have it in your back. So, when someone is feeling the urge to say, "I'm not equipped," Abby, what would you
Mhm.
tell them to say instead?
Yep, I'm gonna go right back to how can we best support you? Because it's like it is that simple. And I have sat down and have had many of those conversations. And like I don't I got my degree in this field and I still don't know everything. And I will never know everything. And so there are times where it's like, while I'm not really shocked by anything, there are times like I haven't navigated this yet. And so I wanna know if we, like, make up an example of a family comes in, they come into the kids ministry, and maybe the student had a really hard day. Instead of coming about it by saying, "We're not equipped to handle this," we can say, "We noticed this, and we want your student to thrive. So how can we do that? What are you doing at school or at therapies?" If we're seeing a behavior for 1 hour on a Sunday, I mean, there's, like, no doubt in my mind they're
Right,
seeing that elsewhere,
right.
and so they're working on it, and so that's another one of my favorite lines is, "What are you doing at school or therapy that maybe we could try to do here to make sure your student thrives?" And they send me, like, and so I could have either tried to deal with the behavior for a full month and not figured it out, or I can send that email, and then I had this just happen a couple months ago. I was like, "Hey, this was what we noticed. Do you have any ideas?" And they emailed back with the specific phrase they were using at school, and as soon as we used that phrase, we have not had
Yeah,
that specific behavior since. It was that easy.
yeah. And you and I have talked about this at length before. I think we do make it too hard.
Yep.
And as we look at people with disabilities, they bring so much to the church. So, Abby, what are we missing when we don't include people with disabilities?
Yeah, the body of Christ is suffering, and that's what I tell people, because if we really have to, like, hold up our theology and what we believe to what we're saying to these families. Because if we are preaching that all people are made in the image of God, and they're all gifted with certain gifts, and then what we're saying to these families, like, it's not lining up. So we have to choose, if that's what we're going to preach, then that's what we're also gonna have to practice. So when you preach that they're all made in the image of God, and you believe that everyone has a specific role and a specific gifting within the body of Christ, if those families are not represented in your congregation, then the body of Christ suffers, because we cannot do this without each other. And so, I mean, our students, they are so gifted. That's what I tell people. I'm like, something I hear a lot is, "Oh, what you're doing is so kind." I'm like, "No, we're just being obedient. We're not doing anything above and beyond the Great Commission. We're simply being obedient." And then as we get to know these kids, I have students that are so gifted and talented in art, and we have used his artwork and made it into coloring sheets that students all across our kids ministry use to learn the
That's
Bible
a
story.
great idea. That's a
Yes,
great idea. Yeah, because yes,
yeah.
because we need to help them use their not just come in and be served, they wanna serve too. What are some other ideas where you have given them opportunity to serve the church? That's awesome on coloring sheets. So easy.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
easy.
and to see how excited he got to see it, and I showed his parents, I'm like, "Hey, by the way, this is what he drew," and we made it into a coloring sheet, and, like, they were almost crying about it, but,
Sure.
um, the another thing that we did was and I understand, like, I do work at a bigger church. So we have a coffee bar, but I talked to the people who run that and I said, "Hey, this student really has a heart for service. I would love to get him serving." Not I'm big on like not just trying to find tasks to like fill the time, but say like
Exactly.
I know he's good at this or she is good at this. And so we went the night before and we helped them set up the coffee bar and get everything ready for and like our coffee bar does serve a lot of people, but I walked in that morning and I smelled the coffee, like, throughout the church, and all I could think was, like, my student prepared that, and my
That's
student
right.
is serving all of these people today because we gave him that opportunity to serve, and not everyone will know, like, who prepared it and the time that was spent on it, but I know, like, how much love he poured into that, and so even like, just to have that smell, like, almost made me cry when I walked in because 'cause I'm like, I know who like, little hands and a big heart
That's
were
right.
behind that.
That's right. And I love what you said, though. We're not just finding a hole and then putting something in. I had someone that asked me, okay, I have a person with disabilities that wants to serve. Where should I have them serve? I said, well, how do you do it with any other person? Don't you talk to them about what they love doing? And
Yep,
so I think we need to do that. We need to find out what they love doing because someone who is not extroverted and someone who doesn't love being around people, putting them at the coffee bar is probably not the right place for them. So, yeah,
right.
find out what they love to do. So, Abby, as we wrap up, if a church leader is listening and they're thinking, we're just not ready for this, what encouragement, what next step, what should they
Mm.
encourage them?
Yeah, I'm just gonna start going through the different verses that go through my mind, and I I'm so bad at this. I never can remember like what book and chapter it comes from, but the one that I go to is I believe it's First Corinthians, but Paul is saying like the necessity is laid upon me and woe to me if I do not preach the gospel. And what an encouragement to us, like, woe to us if we do not preach the gospel. And then I think of also Paul going on like another missionary journey, and he said, "Hey, I'm actually leaving this town to go to another because I need to go where Christ has not been proclaimed yet." And we live in a day and age where we have missed an entire people group right in front of us, and yet we get to be an answer to that,
Yeah,
and we get to be a part of that revival that is happening, and so it's exciting. It's not to look at this and look at it as a problem or look at it as something that's daunting, but to look at it and say, "Wow, God, you've entrusted me with this, and I get to be your hands and feet in this." And I believe the Great Commission, that's what I hear from a lot of church leaders is like, "Well, this is not my calling." And I will lovingly say, "It is. We're all under the Great
that's
Commission."
right. All
So that
people,
means
all people.
right. We're making disciples of all nations. And so just going back to that, it's like I get to preach the gospel today. I get to make disciples today. And that means this student right in front of me. And so it's just take the next step. Ask how you can support a family. Go into your community and see where they are at and just figure out what would make them want to come. Not want to come because they want to.
Right.
Not everyone, but a
Hmm.
lot of people want to come, but what's stopping them from coming and doing that? You know, do we add there's so many tangible things. Do we add parking signs so that their eloper doesn't have a chance to elope through the
Yes,
parking lot? Do we make a sensory room or do we have a space in a hallway? Do we buy a special interest? Listen, if my student's going to learn the gospel through Paw Patrol, I'm going to have Paw Patrol
that's
ready for
right.
them.
That's right.
And I mean, I had one I'll end with this story, but I had one mom reach out to me and she was almost crying. She's like, "We've been asked to leave so many churches.
Oh.
I've been called to come pick him up every single time."
Oh,
And so we just went through and I just like we do an intake form. I would encourage that. That is so
absolutely.
helpful.
Absolutely.
Families, I know everyone's like, "They don't need another thing to do." They actually really appreciate it because they want to stay in service.
Right.
But we went through the intake form and I got to know him and, you know, I created like a buddy bag, a visual schedule, but mom was like, "He loves dinosaurs." I'm like, "Easy." We had a weighted dinosaur, and we met him outside the door for his first Sunday, and I, like, squat down, got on his level, and I showed him the dinosaur, and he ran. Like, he left mom, ran to me, came and got the dinosaur, and transitioned perfectly in the classroom, and then when mom picked up, she was like, "How did he do? Did he cry?" And we're like, "He didn't cry at all, like, he did so good." And she started crying. She was like, "Are you serious?" And we're like, "Girl, no, like, he, like, did amazing. He had so much fun." And we're like, "He went to worship," and she just, like, she couldn't believe it. And it was a weighted dinosaur that got him into the
Right,
classroom.
right.
Yeah,
Have you read Uniquely Human by Barry Prezant?
I have not.
It's one of my favorite books about autism, and he talks about so often we talk about autistic people having obsessions, and he said instead, we should think of them as enthusiasms because that totally
Yeah.
reframes how we're looking at it, and you talking about the dinosaur, there are yeah, find out what they're interested in, and if they like dry erase boards, well, then buy a dry erase spend 10 bucks on a
Yep.
dry erase board, and it's amazing how little things like that will make a child feel comfortable and enable them to stay the whole time. Well, you have a bazillion of great ideas. We always end, though, with a couple rapid fire questions, okay?
Oh,
You ready
okay.
for that? Okay, when your day goes sideways, what's your go-to reset?
When my day goes
Yeah,
sideways,
hard day.
um, I am gonna come into my room, get on my knees, and I'm gonna start praying and be like, "God, can we try this again? Start this over?" That's what I do.
Nice. What's a memorable gift from your childhood?
Probably my first tricycle. I don't know why, but that's the one I remember the most.
There's a lot of bikes and trikes that make it into the favorite. There's something about I don't know. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
If you could only eat one food, what would it be?
Tacos.
You and me, both. Or any
Yes.
Mexican food. Yeah, I'm good on that.
Yep.
This is the last one. Finish this thought. Every child
Should feel safe, loved, and welcomed within the body of Christ.
Yes, absolutely. I 100% agree. Abby, people are going to want to find you and your good stuff. Where might they find you? Where's the best place?
Yeah. So I usually hang out on Instagram over at the Accessible Gospel. I tell people I don't always get it right. My mouth gets me in trouble a lot, and I just started it in September of last year, so I'm very new to it, but it's like not polished and curated, but it's just me sharing what I've learned along the way.
And it's great practical tips. So, yeah, go visit her there. Abby, so great to be with you. And I look forward to be with you in person soon.
Thank you so much, Kim. This totally filled my cup.
Thank you so much for joining me today on Every Child Belongs. If you found today's episode helpful, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. And don't forget to share this with a friend who might need to hear it. Together, we can create a world where every child belongs.